All right, everybody. Today we're talking about the war with Mexico. And let's go back. Let's go back a little bit. Back to 1844. There was an election, and up for we had Polk from the Democrats and Clay from the Whigs. Now, those were the people on the ballot, but the real issue was expansion or maintenance of the republic. Now, this is an idea that goes back to classical republicanism. You can read Machiavelli, you can read Harrington, and they all bring up the idea: do we just stay put and maintain what we got and improve what we got, or do we conquer other territory and build an empire? So Clay really wanted to maintain, and Polk wanted to expand. And so examples of expansion was always like the Roman Empire, because that empire was actually built under the Republic, most of it. Not all of it, but majority of it. And then the example of maintenance is always Venice, the Republic of Venice. So Polk wanted to expand, Clay wanted to maintain, and Polk won. So what was on the menu for expansion? We've got Oregon country in the northwest, and we have Texas in the southwest. Now, look at this map. Okay, there's problems with both of these territories. You got the British who claim they actually claim all of Oregon territory until there's the 49th parallel compromise. Now, in Texas, we also have a problem because you have this area here, which is pretty much definitely Texas. It's pretty well settled. But then you have all this, which is claimed by Texas. Okay, this is going to be problematic because you have this territory which is claimed by Mexico. So if we annex Texas, we're going to possibly have a confrontation with Mexico. Next slide. So, with Texas, now as we ended last week, we talked about the Army of Observation going into disputed territory. Shooting began, and President Polk went to Congress, and rather than trying to convince them to declare war, he says, oh, you guys have to declare war because a state of war already exists. Okay, just do it. Just do your job. But some of them are going to take their job very seriously. Next slide. We have the peace movement led by a young Abraham Lincoln, Congressman Abraham Lincoln from Illinois. Now, a lot of people, when they think of American anti-war or peace movements, they think of Vietnam. There's the more recent opposition to the Iraq War. But really, it begins with this war. Our first real peace movement begins with the war with Mexico. And so Lincoln and a few of his other Whigs who do not want war, they want to hold the president to a higher standard, and so they want him to do his job. So he introduces the Spot Resolution. The Spot Resolution, if it would have passed, would have required the president to report to Congress the spot where the Army of Observation was when they were fired upon, and to prove whether that spot was in disputed territory or not. Now, they're just a small minority in Congress, And so nothing really happens with this, but you do have these people agitating for peace and, you know, giving the idea that this is an illegal war. That, you know, we started it, we shouldn't be involved in it, we need to stop it. Next slide, please. Okay, so we do go to war, Congress declares war. We invade a few ports in Mexico. We actually do invade Mexico City and capture it. We do send soldiers into Alta California. Now, I need to explain, you know, because at this time, like many times during the 19th century and the early 20th century, we have a really puny army of, like, you know, maybe 15,000 men, and we have to grow it really quickly. So we do that, but we also we activate the militias. So a militia is, you know, today we call it the National Guard. Of course, it's been more formalized, and we have a National Guard where you train once a weekend and 2 weeks out of the year, and you will be activated possibly in time of war, maybe during a natural disaster, a state of emergency, and that is our National Guard today. But you have the militias, which were actually the ancestors to the National Guard that we have today. So militias, and then early 20th century, we developed the National Guard Bureau to make them more formal. Okay, so we have, you know, we take these territories, but okay, so you have Kearny, who leads the Mormon battalion into Santa Fe and then into Southern California. They don't see a lot of action. You have Fremont, who goes over here, and he is there to support it's a little confusing what he's actually there to do, and he actually eventually gets in trouble and gets court-martialed, but there is a revolution going on in California, and they establish the Bear Republic. The Bear Republic still lives on today on the California flag. You see the big bear, and it says California Republic. It goes back to the idea before statehood, before territoriality, but it goes back to this Bear Republic. That really only lasted like a couple months. And then you also get the line from the Marine Corps hymn, from the halls of Montezuma. Now, we already covered To the Shores of Tripoli during the Jefferson administration, and this is where during the Polk administration you get From the Halls of Montezuma, and that's a reference to the taking of Mexico City. All right. Now, the California had their own republic. Texas claims, you know, they didn't always have good recognition by other powers, but they did function as their own sovereign territory, at least in the east, for about a decade before they were annexed. You do have other places, like Vermont was like a separate independent republic for a little bit before it joined the Union. Let's see, you had other places. Hawaii, which was an actual kingdom before annexation. Well, actually, they had a coup, and then they had annexation. So you have some places that actually had that did actually function as an independent nation. Now, one of those would also be the state of Deseret. Now, we talked about the Mormons who came from Illinois, from Nauvoo, went into Iowa to winter quarters, and that was just sort of a staging ground where they would be led by Brigham Young. into Salt Lake, into the Salt Lake area. But pretty soon after they got settled there, Brigham Young started sending out colonies to populate what he would call the state of Deseret. Now initially, this was going to be an independent republic. However, once the war occurred, he realized that they're pretty much, this territory is surrounded by the United States, so we can hope for statehood. Okay. Now this is some cool personal history that I kind of ran into here. I was down in Salt Lake City a couple years back, I guess a few years back, and if you've been to Trolley Square, there's a bookstore there, and it's 2 stories. Downstairs they have used books. Upstairs they have rare books. And the owner of the bookstore actually showed to me, he went and got it with gloves on, and it was under plastic, and showed it to me. It was actually a draft constitution of the state of Deseret. Okay, they actually did that about 3 times. They had a constitutional convention and said, okay, here's our document. We're gonna send it to Congress. We're gonna be a state. And then Congress rejected it, and this went on for decades. So you had, and as time went on, Congress started picking off parts of this and organizing other territories. Let's see, you had this and up to the Civil War, and then during the Civil War, Congress makes Nevada a state, and kind of.
Didn't they make Idaho a territory too?
Yeah, during the Civil War, Idaho became a territory. And this was all kind of fast-tracked because of the discovery of gold and silver, especially in Nevada. They became a state really quickly. They thought they were going to get the population. They didn't really get the population required. And so they kind of lowered the threshold and allowed Nevada to become a state during the Civil War. And we wanted that. We did that so that we could keep control of these territories out west while Lincoln prosecuted the war in the South. So that's the history of Deseret. And well, eventually they become Utah, the state of Utah, in 1896. All right, so you'll see here everything in orange is Texas, and what happens is we just take the old claim of Texas and say, yeah, that's what we really got when we annexed Texas. This is all U.S. territory now. And then over here in the green, we pay $15 million for all this. Then a few years later, we purchased this for $10 million. Now the reason behind this was because it was good level ground for building a transcontinental railroad. That was the original intention. So that didn't happen until many decades later, but in the meantime we had a civil war, and the Union ended up building the transcontinental railroad that we remember today, that went further north than here. So we had to keep it in Union-controlled territory, not in rebel territory. Okay? But that was the original purpose of this Gadsden Purchase, to build the transcontinental railroad from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific. Eventually we did, but that was a long time later. Thank you.